All right, here I am resleeving my cube. We are on the gold cards now. These are not grouped by uh, guild or color pair. They are just all in a big random order, so we're going to shuffle them up, resleeve them, and maybe chat about some of them as we go, potentially. We will see. All right, well, first up, by luck of the draw, we got Manamorphose. This is a recent addition to the cube. I feel like some people feel like it doesn't do anything. It's like a nothing card, but I don't know. I mean, it fixes your mana. It makes your deck a little more consistent. It draws a card, triggers all the spells matter stuff. I like fixing my mana and making my spells more consistent. Not sure if we're going to lay these out yet, but we'll see. Abrupt Decay, a classic. I really want one of the Time Spiral remastered old border foils of this bad boy, but it is not cheap, so that's on a maybe acquire someday list. That's not going into the cube anytime soon, I can imagine. It's one of my favorite removal spells. All right, Teferi Time Raveler is a little bit contentious. Some people loathe playing against this card and maintain it is like one of the least fun Magic cards ever printed. I think it's great. Hey, what's up, Acquisition Octopus? Look, these times are a bit odd for American people, too. Who streams in the middle of the afternoon on a Saturday? I don't know. Yeah, the starter deck lists, I mean, they're up on my Cube Cobra profile if you want to see them. I'm probably going to write an article about them. They're getting pretty close to a point where I am happy with them enough to, quote-unquote, release a V1 or whatever. So, but the lists are there. There's a couple changes I have planned to make. Anyway, let's talk about Teferi Time Raveler. Some people hate playing against this card. They think it's like the least fun Magic card ever printed. I don't know. To me, it plays kind of like just a really good Repulse, and I like making Repulse playable at a power level like my cube. So, very few times in cube, in my experience, does it end up being anywhere near as frustrating as is it constructed, because if you're playing it, you're one of the blue drafters, and it's really only amazing against counter Magic, and so the chance there's another blue drafter that has so much counter Magic that they are frustrated by Teferi Time Raveler when you're also drafting blue seems kind of unlikely. We got Dreadboard. This one is a bore. Dread boring, more like, but it does the job. You need a certain amount of removal. That one's flexible. Don't mind that it's sorcery speed. Lingering Souls is a card that just always performs. It seems like it should be so unassuming on its face. Just make a couple tokens. But so many decks very happy to have this. Also an overperformer in Lurrus decks, where Lurrus, oftentimes has a very, very low curve, and on account of having a very low curve, doesn't always have things to do with a lot of extra mana. Lingering Souls goes right in that Lurrus deck, and lets you dump 5 mana into it, so that's pretty good. K-Command, one of my all-time favorites, all-time base. So I don't have a foil this one. Should snap one of those up. I don't know what they're priced at these days. It was really expensive back when I first added it to my cube, but that was when K-Command was played in Modern, and I don't get the sense that anybody's playing K-Command in Modern these days. I love, this is like kind of my perfect archetype, or one of my archetypes I really like for gold cards, because it is the kind of gold card I'm very happy to splash in a like blue-red deck or a blue-black deck or something. It's pretty easy to justify that because it's so good in the late game, and it's just a really powerful spell. A really good 2-for-1 pretty much all the time. Sometimes better than that. That one I really like. Dreadboard, don't love it. But it's a thing. Here we got Leovold, Emissary of Tress, one of my 2/3 color cards. No, I did not get through it all last night, chill. I only got through all of the solid color, monocolor cards, so we're going to do gold, artifacts, lands today. Leovold, one of my only 3-color cards. I find this card to be worth it in 3-color. I really like it in collected company decks, because, it's got this pretty prohibitive casting cost, but is really good to Coco into play. I find this is a good enough reason to like push people to be a more like Sultai mid-rangey deck that's not doing unfair stuff or big ramp or anything. It's just playing good 2 and 3 drops and forcing you to interact. Where do I put the 3-color cards? I'm going to have like 5 rows here. I'll put the 3-color cards down here. They get a little section all to themselves. Figure of Destiny, iconic, classic. I do love these these, like, not strictly level up the mechanic, but these cards that effectively kind of have this level up thing going on. I do wish it was indicated in some way on the card. You know, inevitably players end up putting a dice or something on it to show what level it's at, and I don't love that. I would really prefer that it just be something actually visible on the game state and not have to be remembered, but I will accept it because I really like one-drops that are not dead draws late in the game or poor draws late in the game. Justice Familiar is probably a pet card of mine. This is probably not really getting there on power level in my environment. The fact that it only can counter target instant or sorcery spell instead of non-creature spell means that in some matchups it's not doing a whole lot. But when you stack those effects together like this, and Esper Sentinel and Thalia, it can really start to become very annoying for your opponent to do anything. I just really love that card. I love that promo. It's got the Azorius watermark. You 3D printed markers for your... you 3D printed prototype markers for your prototype cards in Brothers War. I saw some of those on Reddit, and they look really cool. I think that's a cool thing. I feel like Wizards should have done that, honestly. It would have been very popular. Man, Sprite Dragon. Talk about a card that I underrated that I have come to adore. This card is just so good. Even if you only get to trigger it like once in the early game, like a 2/2 flyer for 2 with haste is really good. And I've had times where I have gotten to the late game, drawn this thing, and just immediately turned it into a 4/4. And that's pretty nuts. Vanishing Verse. This is in the sort of Dreadboard category of removal that I don't love, but I tolerate because I want to have enough interaction for all kinds of permanents and things in my cube. That being able to answer pretty much everything is a nice catch-all. Hello, Casanova Frankenstein. Yeah, big Sprite Dragon fan. How do you feel about that card in Power Max cubes, Sprite Dragon specifically? I think, you know, Power Max, people say Power Max like it's one thing, and I don't really think it is one thing. I think Sprite Dragon is very good if you run a lot of cheap cantrips, a lot of cheap burn, and especially if you support a like spell slingery deck, which is maybe kind of obvious, but I think if you have those things, even at the highest power levels, it can be totally defensible. Hola, papi. Fractured Identity. This is like this Fractured Identity, I would say, is not really within the design goals of my cube per se. It's kind of a different card than the rest of my cube, but I just think it's very cool, and players love it. People really love taking Fractured Identity highly, so even though I don't think it's like fantastic in this environment, which is so low curving, it's there because I know my players love it, so fantastic. Grist. Talked about this a little bit on last night's stream, but really fun to Green Sun Zenith into Grist or to unearth Grist. The fact that it's a creature in other zones has been really relevant for me. Oh, Casanova, is that you, Patrick? Or is this another person that works at a bike shop on Saturdays and is looking to kill some time? And if you don't want to dox yourself on the stream, you can just text me. Or if you're not Patrick, what a coincidence. Red and 6, that card is unfair. It's really powerful. Red and 6 definitely kind of a power outlier in this environment, but it's a power outlier that, you know, I think one of the most important things with any cube is choosing what your power outliers are, and I'm happy for a little 2-mana value-oriented Planeswalker to be a power outlier. I think that's cool and fun. Speaking of deciding what your power outliers are, Uro is a contentious card in my environment. Not contentious in that people disagree on how good it is. Everyone knows Uro's kind of messed up here. Contentious as to whether or not it actually belongs here. Is it too powerful? Is it broken? And also does have a fair bit of life gain, which is the thing that I am notoriously a little bit wary of. I do have life gain in my queue. I've got Uro. We'll come across Lightning Strike in a moment here. And I just think that these Titans, both Uro and Kroxa, are some of the most dynamic and fun win conditions for all different kinds of decks. The kind of little effect you get the first time you play it and it gets sacrificed is good. It's nice. You're happy to do it. And then having to be really committed to the 2-color combo that the Titan is in because you got to pay, you know, XXYY to escape it. And also having to use that resource of cards in your graveyard is a real cost. And it's fun that I think it's fun that your opponent can kind of see it coming and plan around it. I think it's just great. Had a big discussion arguing about Goblin Sharpshooter. I just wanted a joke about if removal was important. Hey, what's up, you dirty boy? You excited to cube tonight, Patrick? Allison, you gotta come out and cube. What are you doing? Hanging out with your puppy? You can come out and cube with us instead. Anyways, Uro, Power Outlier, but I actually really like the play patterns of Uro, and I really hope they finish that Titan cycle someday. I mean, they obviously will someday. I hope they finish it someday soon, though. I think it's a really fun cycle. Here's my other 3-color card. It is Kess, Dissident Mage. Shouts out to release the Allison in the chat. Can the puppy cube? I mean, as far as I'm concerned, the puppy can cube. I have not heard No Land Beyond have a policy of no puppies at cube nights, so I don't see why the puppy can't come by. Many hands make light work for taking care of the pup. Kess, I mean, Allison, close your ears. You're not going to like this. I think Kess is a little below the power level in my cube, but it's just too cool. It's too cool. I think it's worth it. It's so fun when you get to do the thing. There's Kroxa, the other Titan. I really think Kroxa and Uro are almost the exact same power level in this environment. I think people would say Uro is a lot better, but Kroxa is just messed up. These cards that keep coming back, it's the right amount of like sticky for me for a threat. I don't really like the Hex Drinkers and True Name Nemesises and the Scarab Gods of the world that are just like very difficult to remove. These are removable. They're susceptible to almost all removal. But they can come back, but they come back at just the right cost, I think. Like, just the right amount of investment such that if you can remove it once, it's a pretty steep hurdle to, exile, 10 cards from your graveyard to cast this a third time. It's, hard to do that. So having one removal spell for the Titans is already pretty good. And if your opponent gets to bring it back twice, I mean, they kind of deserve that win, is my opinion. I love Fire Ice. Fire Ice is a card I will never cut from this cube. Beautiful, perfect. I think the ice side is better than people think. I feel like a lot of people think Fire Ice is just fire with upside of occasionally having ice, but ice is really good, especially if you're a proactive deck. Prismatic Command, I also really enjoyed this. There's no shortage of Izzet spells that I love. I could run 10 of them if I felt like I had room. Oops, I picked up a card from the wrong pile. Yeah, I just love Izzet spells. Here's Deathrite Shaman. This is another card that was one of my early eternal loves. I used to play Legacy Maverick back in the days when Deathrite Shaman was legal, and I thought it was such a cool card, the cool little Swiss Army knife. I've heard people call it a one-mana planeswalker, and I think that's a pretty good way to put it. There's almost always something you can do with those abilities, and yeah, I don't know. The only thing I don't like about this card is that it held down goblins in Legacy for so long, and then by the time it was out of the way, goblins wasn't really viable anymore. Now I know that, like, Jim Davis will do goblin stuff in Legacy sometimes, get to cheat your Muxus into play or whatever, but not really a competitive deck if you're trying to win. Here's a card I have mixed feelings about, Territorial Kavu. I just wish this was better in, like, a Jund deck and a little worse in, like, the greediest 5-color decks. And then I'd be thrilled with this card. I want, like, good 2-mana threats for, like, the Jundi mid-range decks, or, occasionally, like, Teamer-style mid-range decks. And this, like, fits the bill. It's a great draw late as a 2-drop. But I feel like people see this and think, oh, I got to play as many colors as I can. And that's not what I want them to think. I want them to put that in the other decks, and I want it to be a little better there so that they are rewarded for that. But Parker has told me that it is his favorite card in my cube, and so I really can't cut it, to be fair. I guess if you count Warden of the First Tree, I do have more than 2 3-color cards, and I will put this down here. This is like a hybrid gold card. You got to be either Selesnya or Golgari, but then once you are... Speaking of Parker, this is a card I was actually resold on adding by playing it in Parker's cube. I'm pretty sure it's Parker's cube. What's my favorite card in the whole cube? Don't make me choose. Don't make me choose from all my beautiful children. I really like these 1-drops like Figure of Destiny, Warden of the First Tree, and now Evolve Sleeper and stuff where it just says like, oh, is there a board stall? No, there's not, because I have this little thing which will break a board stall. I don't like board stalls, so I'm happy to get rid of them in any way possible. Put these little gold cards down here in a little pile. Ta-da! No, Acquisition Octopus, I have not updated my opinion on Brainstorm. I still think it is very, very good even without a shuffle. It's not to say that it's not way better with a shuffle. I think with a shuffle, there is like absolutely no comparison in terms of cantrips. Like, it is, I think with a shuffle, it is closer to like Ancestral Recall than it is to your average cantrip like Consider or something. I think it's way better. But still, without a shuffle, I rate it very, very highly. I would probably put it right below Ponder and Preordain if you have no way to shuffle. And then it would go after that, like Get Probe, Consider, Serum Visions, that kind of stuff. We actually talked last night on the stream about the tier list of cantrips and how I perceive them. Brainstorm is way up there. Yeah, the floor is great. The floor is, not just draw a card for 1 mana at instant speed, but draw the best card of your next 3 cards, which is really good. That's a lot of selection. There's Lurrus. Lurrus is a menace in this environment. Lurrus, honestly, Lurrus's days may be numbered. I don't know. I really like the aggressive decks. I like forcing people to play spells they otherwise might ignore, and Lurrus does that. But at 360, the fact that it shows up in every draft, it's a little bit getting a little old sometimes, This card, Knight of the Reliquary, I would say is in like the Kess tier of probably not really good enough, at least good enough for a gold slot, but I love that card too much. Honestly, I love that card for the same reason I love the Deathrite Shaman. Played that in my Legacy Maverick deck back in the day, and got really grew a real like love for it in that context. Okay, here's a card I'm actually thinking of cutting, and I think people... I actually did cut this card. I've cut this card, but I haven't got the Supreme Verdict to replace it. The thing about Damn is, like, sure, yeah, it's really good, but I've started to really rank the fact that it looks like a black card in the pack, but plays like a white card more often as a huge cost. I think people just skip over it. And it's got all this, like, modality that... I don't know, it's got all this, like, complexity and, like, mental overhead for... a card that, like, even like looking at your mulligans, I feel like oftentimes you look at your hand and be like, oh, well, I got all black cards and white mana, and kind of overlook the fact that Damn is actually just a white card. So I actually cut this, but I need to get my Supreme Verdict to replace it. So for now, I'll resleeve it so that I have 360 cards in the cube still. Boy, I love Expressive Iteration. I love when card draw is good enough to get players to take it highly and push them into a color pair, and Expressive Iteration does exactly that. I think maybe better than any other card in Magic's history if you ignore stuff like Ancestral Recall. Oh, so good. So good. I also like that it's, it's card draw that you can play on 2, but really you want to play it on 3. Like, I think that is a nice balancing aspect to it. We talked a little bit about Spell Queller last night on stream too. I usually don't like O-Ring style effects like this, or Banisher Priest style effects like this, where you get to take something under a body. The reason I don't like them is that I feel like it sets you up basically to get blown out in the future, because now all their instant speed removal becomes potentially like really high ceiling, and you can't play expecting it to be removed all the time. The thing I like about the Spell Queller is 2 things. One, it's got flying, so I think you can actually brawl with this, where you so infrequently can brawl with your Banisher Priest because you can't afford to lose it in combat. The evasion here makes it real. I also find that more often than I would have expected, you get to exile something that is like conditional or just much worse to come off the stack later. Like, obviously, exiling an X spell with this thing is great. You take their Prismatic Ending, and that's going to come down on X equals 0, or X equals 0, X equals 1 later. You take a counter spell, they have to like have a removal spell at the right moment in the future to get value off of that. I just find that a lot of things in my cube require you to like have targets and make choices, and Spell Queller very often, just by making you cast it at a different time, is a big downgrade. So I kind of put it in the same tier as like Skyclave Apparition, where even if you do lose your creature later, it is not that bad because you've downgraded their thing enough. And in Skyclave Apparition's case, you're downgrading their permanent to a creature with power and toughness of the mana value. And in Spellqueller's case, you're just really messing with their sequencing in a way that has a big effect, I think, on how games play out. I love Grimflayer. Grimflayer is exactly what I want my Jund decks to have, and yeah, I think Grimflayer's been pretty good here. He doesn't show up in every draft because I think a lot of my players are not sold yet on like the Jund deck, the like fair deck that's got green but doesn't play a bunch of mana dorks. But Grim Flare is a big payoff for that deck, and there's so much graveyard matter stuff. I have so many delve cards, so many escape cards, cards with delirium, cards with Tarmogoyf style abilities that care about types in the graveyard. That it's been really good. I think Grim Flare is great. This is my new favorite gold card, though. I think at least for now, Mawlock. Played this on stream last week. Just everything I ever wanted a fight creature to be. The fact that it's like competitively costed, it's whatever mana value you pay for it is the power and toughness you get, which I think is a good competitive rate. Simple fight on ETB, which is great. Whenever I talk in a stream like this, I talk so much I don't breathe enough and then I yawn. And then this like Terror from the Deep line, you might think I might not like that because it's kind of like additive distraction, doesn't come up that often, but I find it does come up, and it's really nice to have that little consolation if you're at the point in the game where you're playing just a really big dumb guy to attack with. So I really like that you do get to draw that card if you happen to cast it for a butt ton of mana. Love Mawlock. Highly recommend. Really do not love the 40k frame, and I haven't seen them in person, but from what I've seen in like videos and stuff, I don't think I would like the Surge foils either, so Master of Death is a really cool card that is performed here in interesting ways. This is a really cool card in terms of we've talked about this, Anthony and I, where he tried this in the regular cube because we were both kind of in love with this card mechanically when it was printed. It's like just very cool, a tidy little clean story. The way it interacts with the graveyard is cool. In the regular cube, it was a problem though, because in the regular cube, which is a lower power environment, you have to, like, this is just always the best thing to do with your mana, right? Like, there's almost never something in the regular cube that is more worth 3 mana than putting a 3/1 Surveil 2 card into play that your opponent doesn't want to die. So, if you ever have this in your hand, it's always correct to cast it, and then once you've done that, if you have a way to sacrifice it, if you have a way to block with it or whatever, you just do that over and over again. In this cube, a 3-mana 3/1 Surveil 2 is not a good use of 3 mana because it's a more powerful environment, and so you don't usually want to be casting this thing, though you will certainly sometimes. The best thing this thing does, honestly, is just discard for value and then get it back. It's like a really good version of Squee, right? And the fact that it's a really good version of Squee that is playable when you get to the point in the game where you no longer discard it for value and you have extra mana sitting around and you just want bodies on board. I really like the play patterns of this in my cube, but I would definitely be wary of it in a lower power cube because of all the reasons that I mentioned. Oh no, it goes to your hand, Allison, and that's very important. It just says, if this is dead, pay 1 life and draw a card, which is quite good. I like that card emotionally a lot more than like Ashiok, for example. I don't see myself cutting Master of Death anytime soon. Here's a question for chat. So, I got my Baleful Strix here. This is my EMA, Eternal Masters foil Baleful Strix. I really like the look of it. They did come out with the old border foil Baleful Strix. I obviously love old border foil cards, but I think it's a real cost that the old border foil Baleful Strix does not look like an artifact. Like, this card frame is different from the typical, blue, black, gold card frame, right? The ones from this set had that, like, kind of bluish tint to them that made them look different. And they didn't do any kind of alternative treatment for the old border artifacts where they reprinted. This just has the typical gold border. For that reason, I think I'm going to stick with this one instead of switching over to the old border foil. Curious what people think about that. I did cut Yuriko, Allison. I think, Yuriko was just kind of messy, I would say. It's like people thought there was like a ninja thing sometimes, and there's obviously not. It's just kind of attacking on its own, and it's a lot of variance for my taste. I did get got by that against Daniel once when he flipped Treasure Cruise off of it on the first attack, on the first ninjutsu in, which was kind of fun once. If it happened many more times, I think I might be against it. That's it. We've reached the end of my gold cards. As you can see, I do not adhere to the philosophy of equally sized gold card sections. It's worth noting that a lot of these cards through here are actually hybrid cards. Your Judge's Familiar, Manamorphose, Figure of Destiny, Deathrite Shaman. So I don't even think of those as gold cards. They kind of go in a different category where they're actually hybrid. But even beyond that, I'm happy to play gold cards in whatever combinations I want. And like, I only have this one blue-green gold card here in Uro, but blue-green shows up a lot. I would say in most drafts, just because Uro is enough of a big pool to make that happen. Whereas black-white, even though I have a big old stack of gold cards here, doesn't tend to show up quite as much. So yeah, I think people maybe overrate the value of having a balanced gold card section, especially because a lot of these cards end up getting splashed in other decks, in which case, they only kind of belong to that category. I would love a green-white card that I think was like pushed in the right way for my environment. I've considered going back to like Voice of Resurgence, which is good, it's fine. I don't think it's going to excite people though, right? I really want my gold cards to be exciting reasons where you see a Kroxa, you see an Uro, you see a Kolghan's Command, Luris, Fractured Identity, Mawlock. These cards I think pull you into those color combinations, and I don't really think Voice of Resurgence would do that, even though it's really pushed rate. That's my gold section. Next up we got colorless, which is really short.